Gregory Palmer drove to the hospital with a heavy heart. The same route he had taken every day for the past 3 weeks now felt like a path to saying goodbye. His father, William Palmer, was dying. The doctors had made it clear that William's battle with pancreatic cancer was reaching its end. Days, maybe a week at most. The hospital parking lot was half empty at 9 in the morning. Gregory found his usual spot near the east entrance. He sat in his car for a moment, taking deep breaths to prepare himself for another day of watching his father slip away. At 42, Gregory had never imagined himself in this position so soon. His father was only 68, too young to die, but cancer didn't care about fair. Gregory grabbed the small duffel bag from the passenger seat. Inside were fresh pajamas for his dad, a book of crossword puzzles, and some homemade soup from his wife, Molly. Small comforts for a man beyond comfort, but Gregory couldn't bear to come empty-handed. The hospital smell hit him as soon as he walked through the sliding doors, that mix of disinfectant, illness, and cafeteria food that always made his stomach turn. The nurses at the station recognized him with sad smiles. He had become a fixture here, the devoted son who never missed a day. "Morning, Lisa." Gregory nodded to the head nurse. "How is he today?" Lisa's face told him everything before she spoke. "He had a rough night, Gregory. We increased his pain, medication around 2 a.m. He's been sleeping on and off since then." Gregory thanked her and continued down the hall to room 317. He paused outside the door, gathering his strength before pushing it open. William looked smaller today. The hospital bed seemed to swallow his once strong frame. His skin had a gray tinge that hadn't been there yesterday, and his breathing came in shallow rasps. But when he heard Gregory enter, William's eyes fluttered open. "There's my boy," he whispered, his voice a shadow of the booming laugh that had filled their family home for decades. "Morning, Dad," Gregory said, forcing cheerfulness into his voice, as he set the duffel bag down. "Molly made your favorite soup." William's lips twitched in what might have been a smile. "That woman's too good for you." It was their old joke, and Gregory played along. "Don't I know it?" Gregory pulled the vinyl chair closer to the bed and sat down. He took his father's hand, careful of the IV line. William's fingers were cold, the skin paper-thin and bruised from countless needle pricks. "Did you call your brother?" William asked after a moment. Gregory nodded. "Frank says he'll be here tomorrow. His flight gets in at noon. And Karen? She'll be here after work. She's taking the night shift with you." William nodded, satisfied. His 3 children were accounting for themselves, just as he'd raised them to do. Gregory, the oldest at 42, had always been the responsible one. He had followed in William's footsteps, helping run the family's small manufacturing business. Karen, at 38, was the emotional heart of the family, a teacher with 2 kids, who had her father's kind eyes. And then there was Frank, 35, the free spirit who had moved to Chicago to chase dreams that seemed to change every few years. "I need you to promise me something," William said, his voice suddenly stronger. Gregory leaned closer. "Anything, Dad?" "Make sure everyone says goodbye properly." William's eyes locked onto Gregory's, intense despite the morphine haze. "No regrets. No loose ends." Gregory felt his throat tighten. "I promise." William seemed to relax at that, his eyes drifting closed. Again. Gregory sat with him as he slept, the room quiet except for the steady beep of monitors and the rasp of his father's breathing. Around noon, Gregory stepped out to call Frank again. "Hey, what's up?" Frank answered. Sounds of the Chicago L train in the background. "Dad's worse," Gregory said without preamble. "The doctors think it might be days, not a week. You need to get here sooner." There was a pause. "I can't change my flight, Greg. It's non-refundable and work is crazy right now." Gregory pinched the bridge of his nose, fighting frustration. "Frank, this isn't about money. Use my credit card if you have to. Dad needs to see you." "I'll be there tomorrow just like we planned," Frank insisted. "Besides, I've got Steve's 40th birthday party this weekend. I've had those tickets for months." Gregory couldn't believe what he was hearing. A birthday party? Dad is dying, Frank. And I'll be there tomorrow, Frank repeated. Look, I've got to go. My stop is coming up. The call ended, leaving Gregory staring at his phone in disbelief. He wanted to call back and scream at his brother, but what good would that do? Instead, he texted Karen, "Call me when you can," worried about Frank. Gregory returned to his father's room. William was awake again, trying to work the TV remote with shaking hands. "Let me help you with that," Gregory said, taking the remote. "Baseball or news?" "Baseball," William answered. "The Cubs are playing." Gregory found the game and adjusted his father's pillows. "Are you hungry? Molly's soup is still warm." William shook his head. "Not right now. Sit with me and watch the game instead." So Gregory did. They sat together as afternoon stretched into evening, watching the Cubs lose badly to the Cardinals. William drifted in and out of sleep, occasionally asking about the score or commenting on a bad call. It was almost like old times, except for the hospital bed and the knowledge hanging over them both. Dr. Patel came by around 6, checking William's vitals and adjusting his medication. She gestured for Gregory to follow her into the hall. "His kidney function is declining rapidly," she said quietly. "The cancer has spread further than we thought. I'm sorry, but I think we're looking at days, not a week." Gregory nodded, the words hitting him like physical blows. "Should I call hospice?" "We can arrange that tomorrow if that's what your father wants. For tonight, we'll keep him comfortable. Here." After Dr. Patel left, Gregory called Karen again. "I just spoke with the doctor," he told her. "It's happening faster than they thought. You should come now if you can." Karen's voice broke. "I'll get someone to watch the kids and be there in an hour." Gregory returned to his father's side. William was asleep again, his breathing more labored than before. Gregory sat and held his hand, thinking about their family, about his promise, to make sure everyone said goodbye properly. He thought about Frank, somewhere in Chicago, worrying about a birthday party while their father slipped away. Karen arrived as promised, her eyes red, but her composure intact. She kissed their father's forehead and took the chair on the other side of the bed. "Has Frank called?" she asked. Gregory shook his head. "He's still planning to come tomorrow." Karen's lips tightened, but she said nothing. They both knew their brother, knew his pattern of showing up just in time to avoid the hard parts of life. "You should go home and rest," Karen told Gregory. "I've got tonight. Molly and the kids need you too." Gregory wanted to argue, but exhaustion was catching up with him. He hadn't slept properly in days. "Call me if anything changes, anything at all." Karen promised she would. Gregory kissed his father's forehead, whispered, "I love you," and forced himself to leave. The drive home felt surreal. The world continued as normal. People walking dogs, teenagers hanging out at the corner store, a couple arguing outside a restaurant. Didn't they know William Palmer was dying? How could life just go on? Gregory called Frank one more time before bed. It went straight to voicemail. "Dad's getting worse," he said after the beep. "The doctors say it might be days, not a week. Please, come as soon as you can. The birthday party can wait. Dad can't." As Gregory lay in bed that night, Molly's arm around his waist, he couldn't shake the feeling that time was running out faster than any of them had prepared for. His father's words echoed in his mind. Make sure everyone says goodbye properly. But what if Frank didn't make it in time? What if their father's last wish was the one thing Gregory couldn't deliver? Sleep claimed him eventually, but even in his dreams, Gregory was at the hospital waiting for a brother who never arrived. Gregory's phone rang at 3:17 a.m., pulling him from a restless sleep. He knew before he even looked at the screen. Something in him had been waiting for this call all night. "Gregory, it's Karen." His sister's voice was steady but thin. "Dad's gone. He passed about 10 minutes ago." The words hit Gregory like a physical blow, even though he had been preparing for them for weeks. He sat up in bed, aware of Molly stirring beside him. "Was it peaceful?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. "Yes," Karen said. "He just stopped breathing." The nurse said sometimes people wait until their loved ones step out of the room. "I had just gone to get coffee." Gregory closed his eyes. "I'm so sorry you were alone." I wasn't alone when it mattered, Karen said. I was holding his hand a few minutes before. He knew I was there. Gregory promised to meet her at the hospital, within the hour. After hanging up, he sat in the dark for a moment, letting the reality sink in. William Palmer, his father, was gone. Molly wrapped her arms around him from behind. I'm so sorry, Greg. He nodded, unable to speak. After a few minutes, he found his voice again. I need to call Frank. Frank answered on the fourth ring, his voice thick with sleep. Hello? Dad's gone, Gregory said, the words feeling strange in his mouth. He passed away a few minutes ago. The line went quiet. Then, Frank's voice, suddenly alert. I'm so sorry, Greg. I was going to fly out tomorrow. I know, Gregory said, trying to keep the bitterness from his voice. We need to start making arrangements. Can you get on an earlier flight? Maybe today instead of tomorrow? There was a pause, too long to be natural. About that, Frank began, and Gregory felt his stomach drop. Steve's birthday party is tonight. I already paid for the ticket and hotel. I was thinking I could come right after, maybe Sunday. Gregory couldn't believe what he was hearing. Sunday? Dad's funeral will be Saturday. We already talked about this, Frank. Can't you postpone it just a couple days? Steve's been planning this for months and… Gregory hung up. He couldn't trust himself to speak. His father was dead, and his brother was prioritizing a birthday party. Molly looked at him with concern. What did he say? Gregory shook his head. He's not coming until Sunday, after the funeral, because of a birthday party. Molly's eyes widened. That can't be right. You must have misunderstood. I wish I had, Gregory said, standing up to get dressed. I need to get to the hospital. Karen's waiting. The drive to the hospital was a blur. The streets were empty at that hour, the traffic lights changing for no one. Gregory tried to focus on what needed to be done. There would be paperwork, funeral arrangements, people to notify. But all he could think about was Frank's voice, so casual about missing their father's funeral. Karen was sitting in the hospital waiting room when he arrived, her face pale but composed. They hugged for a long time, neither speaking. Finally, Karen pulled back. Did you reach Frank? She asked. Gregory nodded. He's not coming until Sunday. Karen's expression hardened. Sunday? But the funeral? We'll be without him, Gregory finished. He has a birthday party. Karen stared at him in disbelief. A birthday party? Dad just died. Gregory had no answer. They sat in silence for a moment before a nurse approached with clipboard in hand. There were forms to sign, belongings to collect, decisions to make. The business of death moved forward regardless of their grief or Frank's absence. Later that morning, they met with Peter Howard at the funeral home. Peter had been a friend of their father's, and he guided them through the process with quiet dignity. William left instructions, Peter told them, opening a file. He wanted something simple, a closed casket, a brief service. He picked out the hymns and readings already. Gregory nodded, unsurprised. His father had always been a planner, always thinking ahead. Even in death, he was making things easier for his children. When would you like to hold the service? Peter asked. Gregory and Karen exchanged a look. Saturday, Gregory said firmly. Dad wouldn't want us to wait. They spent the next hours making calls. Relatives, friends, employees from the family business. Everyone expressed shock, even though William's illness had been no secret. Death, even when expected, always came as a surprise. Gregory called Frank again that afternoon, but it went straight to voicemail. He didn't leave a message. What was left to say? That evening, Gregory and Molly sat at their kitchen table with Karen and her husband Joe. They shared a bottle of whiskey, William's favorite, and told stories about their father. The time he built a treehouse so elaborate the neighbors thought a professional had done it. The way he always sang off-key but with complete confidence. His famous Christmas morning pancakes that somehow included every leftover in the refrigerator. Remember, when he taught us to drive? Karen said, smiling through tears. How he'd press that imaginary brake on the passenger side. Gregory nodded. He taught all three of us in that old blue Chevy. Even Frank, The mention of their brother's name brought a heaviness to the room. Joe, who had always gotten along well with Frank, broke the silence. Maybe he'll change his mind. He might still show up. Gregory shook his head. I don't think so. Not this time. The next day was a blur of activity. The obituary needed to be written. Flowers had to be ordered. The church called with questions about the service. Through it all, Gregory kept checking his phone, half hoping to see Frank's name on the screen. It never appeared. Karen found Gregory in their father's study that night. He was sitting at the big oak desk, looking through William's papers. What are you doing? She asked. Dad asked me to make sure everyone said goodbye properly, Gregory said, his voice hollow. I failed him. Karen sat beside him. That's on Frank, not you. Gregory shook his head. I should have tried harder. I should have made him understand. Frank is an adult, Karen said firmly. He made his choice. They sat in silence for a moment. Then Karen pointed to a folder on the desk. What's that? Gregory opened it. Inside was a letter addressed to my children. With trembling hands, he unfolded it and began to read aloud. If you're reading this, I've moved on to whatever comes next. Don't waste time being sad. I had a good run, built a business, raised 3 amazing kids, loved a good woman until the day she left this world. That's more than most people get. I've tried to teach you what matters, family, loyalty, showing up when it counts. If you remember those things, you'll be fine. If you forget them, no amount of money or success will make you happy. Take care of each other. Life is too short for grudges or regrets. Say what needs saying while you can. All my love, Dad. Gregory's voice broke on the last words. Karen wiped tears from her eyes. He knew, she whispered. Somehow he knew Frank wouldn't be here. Gregory folded the letter carefully and put it back in the folder. I'll make a copy for Frank, for when he finally shows up. That night, as Gregory lay in bed staring at the ceiling, his phone buzzed with a text. From Frank. Flight confirmed for Sunday morning. Sorry I can't make it sooner. Give Dad my love. Gregory didn't respond. How could he explain to Frank that it was too late to give Dad his love? How could he make his brother understand what he had thrown away? As Gregory finally drifted toward sleep, he thought about his father's letter. Life is too short for grudges, William had written. Gregory wasn't sure he could live up to that wisdom. Not yet. Maybe not ever. The phone on his nightstand buzzed again, but Gregory didn't check it. Whatever Frank had to say could wait. Tomorrow was another day of preparations, another day of grief, another day of carrying on without their father. And on Saturday they would say their final goodbyes, with or without Frank. Saturday morning arrived with clear blue skies and a gentle breeze. Gregory stood at his bedroom window looking out at the perfect weather. It seemed wrong somehow. There should be rain, or at least clouds. Something to match the heaviness in his heart. Dad arranged good weather for his send-off, Karen said, coming to stand beside him. She had stayed the night, neither of them wanting to be alone. Gregory nodded. He always did think of everything. They got dressed in silence. Gregory in the dark suit he usually wore only for business meetings. Karen in a simple black dress. Molly helped their children get ready, explaining again in gentle terms why they wouldn't see Grandpa anymore. The funeral was set for 11 o'clock at the First Methodist Church, where William had attended services every Sunday for 40 years. As they drove there, Gregory noticed how many businesses had their flags at half-mast. His father had been respected in the community, a small business owner who treated his employees like family. The church parking lot was already filling up when they arrived. Peter Howard met them at the side entrance, guiding them to a small waiting room where they could have a moment of privacy before the service. There's been a steady stream of people arriving, Peter told them. Your father touched many lives. Gregory nodded, unable to speak past the lump in his throat. Karen squeezed his hand. Is Frank here? She asked, though they both knew the answer. Peter shook his head. Not yet, but there's still time. But time passed and Frank didn't appear. At 11 sharp, the organist began playing Amazing Grace, William's favorite hymn. Gregory and Karen walked down the aisle together, followed by their spouses and children. They took their places in the front pew, leaving an empty space between them where Frank should have been. The service was beautiful in its simplicity. Pastor Dan, who had known William for decades, spoke about his kindness, his integrity, his love for his family. Friends stood to share memories. William teaching neighborhood kids to fish at the lake. William organizing the annual Christmas toy drive. William staying late at his factory to help a new employee master a difficult task. When it was time for the family to speak, Karen went first. She walked to the pulpit with steady steps, her voice clear despite her grief. My father taught us 3 important things, she said. Work hard, be kind, show up when it matters. He lived by these principles every day of his life. When our mother got sick, he was there for every treatment, every appointment. When we had successes to celebrate or failures to overcome, he was there. He showed up. That's what love looks like. Her gaze swept over the congregation, pausing briefly on the empty space in the front pew. No one missed her meaning. Gregory spoke next, sharing stories that made people laugh through their tears. He talked about fishing trips and baseball games, about the way William could fix anything with duct tape and determination, about how he'd coached Little League long after his own children had outgrown it. My father believed in community, Gregory concluded. He believed we are all responsible for each other. Today, looking at all of you, I see his legacy. I see a community that came together to honor a good man. Thank you for being here. Thank you for showing up. After the service, they gathered at the cemetery. The graveside ceremony was brief. A prayer, a final hymn, the lowering of the casket. Gregory threw the first handful of dirt onto the casket, the sound it made echoing in his ears. Karen followed, then each of the grandchildren. Gregory's son, Ben, cried silently. Karen's daughters held hands, their young faces solemn. People came to the house afterward. Neighbors brought casseroles and cakes. Friends from the church set up tables in the backyard. William's employees arrived together, many of them still in their work clothes, having come straight from the factory where Gregory had insisted they keep a half-day schedule. Dad would want the work to go on, he had told them. Gregory moved through the crowd, accepting condolences, sharing memories. Every few minutes, he caught himself looking toward the door, expecting to see Frank walk in, but he never did. As evening approached, the visitors began to leave. Karen found Gregory sitting alone on the back porch steps. You should eat something, she said, handing him a plate of food he didn't want. I'm not hungry. Eat anyway. Dad would be mad if he knew you weren't taking care of yourself. Gregory took the plate to please her but set it aside after she left. His phone buzzed in his pocket. A text from Frank. How did it go? Gregory stared at the message in disbelief. How did it go? As if their father's funeral had been a movie premiere or a blind date. He typed back, how do you think it went? You missed saying goodbye to Dad for a birthday party. Frank's reply came quickly. It wasn't just any party, Greg. Steve's been my friend for 20 years. Gregory felt rage building inside him. And William was your father for 42 years, he typed, then turned off his phone. Molly found him, still sitting there an hour later, the untouched plate beside him, his phone dark on his lap. The kids are asking for you, she said gently, and there's a call you should take. Richard Powell is on the landline. Gregory sighed. Richard was their father's attorney and friend. Tell him I'll call him back on Monday. I can't deal with legal matters right now. He says it's important, something about your father's will. Gregory reluctantly went inside to take the call. Richard's voice was somber, but practical. I'm sorry to bother you on such a difficult day, Gregory. But William left specific instructions. He wanted the family to meet at my office next Friday for the reading of the will. All 3 of you need to be there. Frank didn't even make it to the funeral, Gregory said bitterly. What makes you think he'll show up for the will reading? There was a pause on the line. I think he'll be there, Richard said carefully. William made sure of that. After hanging up, Gregory relayed the information to Karen, who was helping clean up the kitchen. "What did Richard mean about Dad making sure Frank would be there?" she asked. Gregory shrugged. "I guess we'll find out on Friday." That night, after everyone had gone and the house was quiet, Gregory sat in his father's study again. He could feel William's presence here among his books and papers, the collection of fishing lures on the wall, the framed photos of family trips. One photo caught his eye. William teaching Frank to ride a bike. Frank couldn't have been more than 6, his face a mix of fear and determination, William's hand steady on the back of the seat. The three of them had spent a whole Saturday in the Idea Park, William jogging alongside as first Gregory, then Karen, then Frank, mastered 2 wheels. He had stayed until all 3 of them could ride on their own, never showing impatience, never checking his watch. Gregory picked up the photo, remembering. Their father had always been there for the important moments. Always. He had taught them, by example, what it meant to show up, to be present, to put family first, and Frank had failed to learn that lesson. Gregory's phone buzzed again. He had turned it back on to check messages from the factory. Another text from Frank. "Flying in Thursday night, can you pick me up at the airport? Flight gets in at 9:45. Gregory stared at the message for a long time before replying with a single word. No. Let Frank find his own way. Let him take a taxi or rent a car. Let him feel for once what it was like to have no one there when you needed them. Gregory put the photo back on the shelf and turned out the light. As he climbed the stairs to join Molly in bed, he thought about the week ahead. The factory would need his attention. There would be thank you notes to write for the flowers and food. And on Friday they would gather at Richard's office to hear their father's final wishes. He hoped, for Frank's sake, that their father had been a more forgiving man than Gregory felt capable of being right now. The week after the funeral passed in a blur for Gregory. He threw himself into work at the factory, staying late every night. It was easier to focus on order forms and production schedules than to face the empty house that still held so many traces of his father. Karen called him daily, worried about how he was coping. "You need to rest, Greg," she said on Thursday evening. "You can't keep pushing yourself like this." "I'm fine," Gregory insisted, though they both knew he wasn't. "Have you heard from Frank?" Karen sighed. "He texted to say he landed safely. He's staying at the Holiday Inn downtown." Gregory nodded, even though his sister couldn't see him through the phone. Frank hadn't reached out to him directly since Gregory had refused to pick him up at the airport. Part of him felt guilty about that. A larger part still felt the burning anger that had been growing since the funeral. "Are you ready for tomorrow?" Karen asked. The will reading. Gregory had been trying not to think about it. "As ready as I can be," he said. Richard said to be there at 10. After hanging up, Gregory drove home, his headlights cutting through the early evening darkness. The house was quiet when he arrived. Molly had taken the kids to her mother's for dinner. She had left a note on the kitchen counter. "Lasagna in the fridge. Heat at 350 for 20 minutes. Love you." Gregory wasn't hungry, but he knew Molly would worry if he didn't eat. As he waited for the oven to preheat, he wandered into the living room. Family photos covered the walls. Holidays, vacations, graduations. William's face smiled from many of them, always proud, always present. A knock at the door startled Gregory from his thoughts. He opened it to find Frank standing on the porch, hands in his pockets, looking uncomfortable. "Hey," Frank said. "Can I come in?" Gregory stepped aside silently. Frank entered, glancing around the familiar house as if seeing it for the first time. "Hasn't changed much," he commented. Gregory said nothing. He went to the kitchen to check on the oven, leaving Frank to follow. "I thought we should talk before tomorrow," Frank said, leaning against the counter. "Clear the air." Gregory turned to face his brother. They looked alike, people often said. Same dark hair, same strong jaw. But where Gregory's eyes held steadiness, Frank's always seemed to be looking for the next thing, the next escape. "What's there to talk about?" Gregory asked. "You missed Dad's funeral for a birthday party. There's no clearing the air from that." Frank sighed. "I knew you wouldn't understand," Steve's been my best friend since college. This party was important. More important than saying goodbye to our father. That's not fair. I said goodbye to Dad when I visited last month. He was still conscious then. The funeral was for us, not for him. Gregory stared at his brother in disbelief. The funeral wasn't just for us. It was for everyone who loved Dad. His friends, his employees, the whole community. It was to honor his life together. And I'll honor him in my own way. Frank said, I don't need a church full of crying people to remember Dad. The oven timer beeped, breaking the tense silence. Gregory took out the lasagna, more for something to do than from any desire to eat. Want some? He asked, his voice flat. Frank shook his head. I ate at the hotel. He paused, then added, Karen's mad at me too, isn't she? What do you think? I think both of you are overreacting. Dad would understand. Gregory put down the spatula he was holding with such force that it clattered against the counter. Don't tell me what Dad would understand. You weren't there when he was dying. You weren't there when he asked us to make sure everyone said goodbye properly. You weren't there, Frank, that's the whole point. Frank looked away first. I should go. I'll see you at Richard's office tomorrow. After Frank left, Gregory sat at the kitchen table, the lasagna growing cold in front of him. He couldn't eat. All he could think about was Frank's casual dismissal of their father's funeral, as if it had been nothing more than an inconvenient social obligation. The next morning dawned gray and rainy. Gregory and Molly drove to Richard Powell's office in silence. Karen and Joe were already there when they arrived, standing under the awning to stay dry. Has Frank shown up yet? Gregory asked. Karen shook her head. Not yet. They waited outside until Frank's taxi pulled up at 5 minutes to 10. He joined them without greeting, and the five of them entered the building together. Richard's office was on the 3rd floor, a wood-paneled room that smelled of leather and old books. He welcomed them with handshakes and condolences, directing them to a conference table where a folder lay at each place. William was very specific about how this meeting should proceed, Richard said once they were all seated. Before I read the will itself, he asked me to play this for you. Richard pressed a button on his computer, and suddenly William's voice filled the room. Gregory felt his chest tighten. It was a recording, made sometime before his illness had weakened him, his voice still strong and sure. Hello, my children. If you're hearing this, I'm gone. I hope it was peaceful at the end. I hope I didn't linger too long and become a burden to any of you. But most of all, I hope you're all there together now, listening to this old man's last words. I've tried to be fair in how I've divided things. The business, the house, the cabin at the lake, these aren't just things. They're parts of our family story. Take care of them and they'll take care of you. I want you to know I'm proud of all three of you. Gregory, my steady one, always reliable, always there when needed. Karen, my heart so full of compassion and strength. And Frank, my free spirit, who taught me that there are many ways to live a good life. Whatever disagreements you may have had, whatever mistakes you've made with each other, let them go now. Family is too precious to waste on grudges. Love each other. Take care of each other. Remember me by how you treat each other. The recording ended, and the room fell silent, except for Karen's quiet sniffles. Even Frank looked moved, his eyes shining with unshed tears. Richard cleared his throat. Now to the formal reading of the will. He opened his copy of the document and began to read. The legal language was dense, but the meaning was clear. William's estate wasn't enormous, but it was substantial. The family home, the manufacturing, business, some investments, and the vacation cabin by the lake where they'd spent summers as children. The business would go to Gregory, who had already been helping run it for years. To my son Gregory, who has proven himself a capable businessman and a fair employer, I leave Palmer Manufacturing, with all its assets and liabilities, with the hope that he will continue to provide good jobs and quality products. Karen would receive the family home as she had expressed interest in raising her children there. To my daughter Karen, whose children deserve to grow up in a house filled with love and memories. I leave the family home at 1247 Maple Street, free and clear of any mortgage. Frank was to receive the lake cabin and a significant portion of the investments. To my son Frank, who has always found peace and joy at the lake, I leave the cabin and property at Lake Evergreen, along with 60% of my investment portfolio, with the hope that he will find a place to put down roots. The remaining 40% of the investments were to be divided between Gregory and Karen, along with various personal items of sentimental value. There were also small bequests to a few charities William had supported over the years. When Richard finished reading, Frank let out a low whistle. Dad always loved that cabin, he whispered to Gregory with a smile. Gregory nodded silently, his mind racing. The cabin was worth nearly as much as the family home. Combined with the investments, Frank was receiving the largest share of their father's estate, despite being the least involved in William's care, despite missing the funeral. Richard handed each of them a copy of the will, along with various papers that needed signatures. "Take your time reading through everything," he said. "I'll answer any questions you have." As Karen and Frank began to look through their folders, Gregory stared at his copy of the will. His father's last message played in his mind. Family is too precious to waste on grudges. But how could he let go of his anger when Frank seemed so untouched by the pain he had caused? Gregory signed the necessary papers mechanically, barely hearing Richard's explanations about probate and transfer of assets. One thought kept circling in his mind, growing stronger with each pass. This wasn't over yet. This wasn't justice. 2 days after the reading of the will, Gregory sat in his car outside Richard Powell's law office. He had called early that morning to make an appointment, saying only that he needed to discuss a personal matter. Richard had sounded surprised, but agreed to see him at 3 o'clock. Gregory checked his watch. It was 10 minutes to 3. He was early as usual. Frank had already left town, heading back to Chicago with promises to return soon to check out the lake cabin. Karen had invited both her brothers to dinner the night before, an attempt at family reconciliation that had gone poorly. Frank had talked excitedly about his plans to renovate the cabin, perhaps rent it out when he wasn't using it. Gregory had remained mostly silent, the anger inside him growing with each of Frank's casual comments. "You okay?" Karen had asked when she walked him to his car afterward. "Fine," Gregory had lied. "Just tired." Now, sitting outside the law office, Gregory knew what he needed to do. His father's voice echoed in his head. Family is too precious to waste on grudges. But this wasn't about a grudge. This was about values, about consequences, about what really mattered in life. At exactly 3 o'clock, Gregory entered the building and took the elevator to Richard's office. The receptionist, Amy, greeted him with a sympathetic smile. "Mr. Powell is ready for you," she said, leading him to the same conference room where they had gathered for the will reading. Richard stood to shake his hand. "Gregory, good to see you. What can I help you with today?" Gregory took a seat across from the attorney. "I'd like to update my will," he said without preamble. Richard raised an eyebrow. "I see. May I ask what prompted this decision?" "Recent events have made me reconsider some things," Gregory said carefully. "I want to make sure my wishes are clear." Richard nodded and pulled out a legal pad. "Do you have your current will with you?" "I believe we drafted it about 5 years ago, after your second child was born." Gregory handed over a folder from his briefcase. "Here it is. There's only one major change I want to make." Richard reviewed the document quickly, refreshing his memory. "Currently, your estate is divided equally between your wife, Molly, and your 2 children, with Karen and Frank as contingent beneficiaries if something were to happen to all 3 of them. What changes did you have in mind?" Gregory took a deep breath. "I want to remove Frank as a contingent beneficiary." Richard set down his pen and leaned back in his chair. "That's a significant decision, Gregory. May I ask why?" "He missed our father's funeral for a birthday party," Gregory said, the words coming out more harshly than he intended. "I can forgive many things, but not that. Not the way he's handled everything since Dad got sick." Richard was silent for a moment, studying Gregory's face. "You know, In my years of practice, I've seen families torn apart over less, and over much more. Grief affects people differently. This isn't just about grief, Gregory insisted. It's about values. It's about showing up when it matters. Frank has demonstrated that he doesn't share those values. And you're certain about this decision? Gregory nodded firmly. I want Karen's children to receive Frank's portion if something happens to my immediate family. Richard made notes on his legal pad. I'll have the new document drawn up by tomorrow. You can come in to sign it whenever you're ready. As Gregory drove home, he felt no satisfaction, no sense of revenge accomplished. Only a quiet certainty that he had done what needed to be done. His father might be disappointed in his decision, but Gregory believed he would understand the principle behind it. Molly was in the kitchen when he got home, helping their daughter with homework at the table. She looked up when he entered. "How was your meeting?" she asked. "Fine," Gregory said. "Just some paperwork to take care of." He didn't tell her about the will change. It wasn't about hurting Frank or making a statement. It was a private decision, one that reflected his values and what he believed family should mean. That evening, as Gregory helped his son with a science project, his phone rang. It was Frank. "Hey," Frank said, sounding cheerful. "Just wanted to let you know I made it back. To Chicago. Listen, I was thinking about the cabin. Maybe we could all go there this summer like old times. You, me, Karen, all the kids." Gregory closed his eyes. "Maybe," he said, non-committal. "We'll see." "Come on, Greg. Dad would want us to enjoy the place together." "Dad would have wanted you at his funeral," Gregory said before he could stop himself. There was a pause on the line. "Are we ever going to move past that?" Frank asked, his voice tinged with annoyance. "I've apologized. What more do you want from me?" "Have you? Apologized?" Gregory couldn't recall hearing any actual remorse from his brother. "All I've heard are excuses." Frank sighed. "Fine. I'm sorry I missed the funeral. I should have been there." "Is that what you need to hear?" The words were right, but the tone was all wrong. Frank wasn't sorry he'd missed the funeral. He was sorry Gregory was making an issue of it. "I have to go," Gregory said. "Ben needs help with his project." After hanging up, Gregory stared at the phone in his hand. Frank would never understand. He would always be the same Frank, putting his own wants ahead of family needs, showing up only when it was convenient, expecting forgiveness, without true remorse. The next day, Gregory returned to Richard's office to sign the updated will. As he read through the document, he felt at peace with his decision. It wasn't about punishing Frank. It was about living according to the values his father had taught him, the values Frank had rejected. "Everything appears to be in order," Richard said as Gregory signed the last page. "I'll keep the original in our safe, and here's a copy for your records." Gregory tucked the document into his briefcase. "Thank you, Richard. I appreciate your discretion in this matter." Richard nodded. "Of course. Client confidentiality is absolute. No one will know about this change unless you choose to tell them." And Gregory had no intention of telling anyone, especially not Frank. This wasn't a weapon to hold over his brother's head or a bargaining chip to force better behavior. It was simply the quiet consequence of Frank's choices, one he might never even know about. As weeks passed, life began to settle into a new normal. Gregory focused on running the factory, honoring his father's legacy by treating employees with the same respect and fairness William had shown. Karen hosted Sunday dinners at the family home, keeping their traditions alive. Frank visited occasionally, spending time at the lake cabin and talking about bringing friends from Chicago to stay there. Gregory was civil to his brother during these visits. He didn't avoid him or treat him with open hostility. But something had changed between them, something fundamental and perhaps irreparable. 3 months after William's death, Gregory visited his father's grave alone. He stood there in the quiet cemetery, the summer breeze rustling through nearby trees. "I don't know if you'd approve of what I did, Dad," he said softly, "but I think you'd understand why I did it. You taught us that family means showing up, being there for the important moments. Frank chose not to be there for your final goodbye. I can't pretend that doesn't matter." As Gregory placed fresh flowers on the grave, he thought about his father's last message to them. Family is too precious to waste on grudges. Perhaps someday he would find a way to truly forgive Frank. Perhaps someday Frank would understand what he had thrown away by missing their father's funeral. But for now, Gregory had made his choice. His will had been changed in silence, a private acknowledgement that actions have consequences, that some choices reshape relationships forever. Walking back to his car, Gregory felt the weight of his decision, but no regret. He had honored his father in the way that mattered most, by living according to the values William had taught them. Show up. Be present. Put family first. Simple lessons that Frank had failed to learn, and that Gregory would never forget.